Discover the amazing truth about childbirth in medieval times. 7 surprising insights that inspire. Sarah felt a wave of anxiety wash over her like a dark tide as she flipped through her textbooks, preparing for the certification exam that would push her career as a midwife into high gear. Questions whirled in her mind, racing from fears of failure to societal judgments. The tiny town of Maplewood seemed to smother her with outdated ideas about motherhood, especially with the stigma lingering around home births. Why was it so hard for people to understand that every mother should have a choice? She fidgeted with her pen, her brow furrowing with stress as dark thoughts crept in. She thought of her peers, their disapproving gazes cutting through her resolve every time she mentioned her intentions to offer women the option of home births. How could she embrace the wisdom of her ancestors when surrounding voices only whispered of danger? While searching her late grandmother's attic for clues, she stumbled upon an ancient journal that vibrated with untold stories. The delicate parchment crinkled beneath her fingers as she opened it, revealing detailed childbirth practices from medieval times. The ink ran deep, leaving not just words behind but an imprint on her very soul. These women had faced their own struggles, transforming pain into strength, tending to the needs of mothers without the luxury of modern medicine. Their tales resonated with her own aspirations. Memories of her great-great-grandmother as a revered midwife flickered in her mind. Here was someone who had bridged cultures, traversing boundaries during the sacred act of childbirth. But Sarah felt a growing chasm between that legacy and her place in today's world. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As the vibrant accounts drawn from the journal enveloped her, Sarah found herself grappling with her own doubts. How could she honor her family's history while also navigating the rigid norms of medical practice? Torn between ambition and ancestral reverence, she felt like an imposter, one foot firmly planted in the present, the other stumbling over the divide of the past. Her heart raced, and anger bubbled to the surface as her husband expressed his skepticism at dinner one evening. "You can't seriously consider going back to those methods," he had said, concern etched across his features. "It's the 21st century, Sarah." Each word from her loved ones landed like a stone, piling onto her shoulders. The tension swelled like a balloon ready to burst. Wasn't he the goal to empower women? Wasn't she entitled to explore a path that spoke to her deeply? Just then, as she opened her mouth to respond, she felt choked by the weight of expectation. The air had thickened with her mother's anxious glances, and grandmother's silent approval seemed miles away. How could she bridge the past with an uncertain future? The clock ticked loudly, counting down to the moment she had to decide. The community workshop she envisioned loomed ahead, a potential battlefield. Would she stand her ground, or would she falter under the growing strain? With doubt clawing at her sense of self, she realized the battle was just beginning, and the true conflict was with herself. What was she willing to sacrifice for her dreams? Would she dare claim the legacy that called to her from the shadows? The next morning, Sarah felt the weight of the journal in her bag, as if it were carving a new path in her mind. The whispering voices of the past grew louder, echoing in her thoughts. Was she truly ready to breathe life into the legacy of her ancestors? The prospect both excited and terrified her. She needed to confront her own fears if she was going to give women a choice her family had once valued deeply. As she prepared for the workshop, Sarah meticulously went through her notes, scribbling down points she'd gathered from the journal. She focused on empowering narratives about home births from centuries past, stories that portrayed strength, community, and respect for women's bodies. Each stroke of her pen felt like stitching together the fabric of her history. The vibrant tales of her ancestors started to inject life into her previously hollow resolve. Perhaps it was time to bring those stories back into the conversation, to blend caution with courage. Yet as she approached the venue, doubt knotted her stomach. Her mind flashed images of the skeptical glances her peers would share. Would they laugh at her? Would they ridicule the very idea she wanted to defend? She inhaled deeply, reminding herself that the goal was to educate, to begin a dialogue. These women had found strength against the odds. Surely, she could do the same. The room buzzed with anticipation, the air thick with murmurs and laughter. As she stepped to the front, the collective gaze felt heavy against her skin. She could see the familiar faces of her peers, some with crossed arms and turned noses, others with faint curiosity flickering in their eyes. Heart racing, she cleared her throat and opened her presentation with a story, one of a woman who defied the rigid confines of labor, embodying trust in her own body. Their unease slowly morphed into intrigue. However, it wasn't long before questions arose filled with skepticism. But wasn't it dangerous? One of her classmates interjected. What about the advancements we have made in medicine? The challenge rebounded in her chest like a drumbeat, pushing her to ignite her own passion for a subject dear to her. Instead of faltering, Sarah leaned into the moment, her voice steady yet fiercely animated. Change comes from understanding the old ways and merging them with the new, she replied, her gaze steady as it swept across the room. It's not about abandoning modern medicine. It's about giving women back their agency and honoring the journey of motherhood. For every question they raised, she recalled a passage from the journal, each answer fortified by ancestral wisdom. As she ended her presentation, she allowed for a moment of silence to wash over the room, giving her audience time to process. Then, a single hand shot up, an unexpected ally among her staunchest critics. I hadn't thought about it that way before. Maybe exploring these options could really help women. The warmth of that support ignited something within Sarah. While she was far from resolving the apprehensions of everyone in the room, she learned that in sharing her truths, she could spark dialogue. It was the beginning of a journey not just for her, but for those women she aimed to support. But just as she felt a glimmer of triumph, the door creaked loudly, announcing the arrival of a figure from her past. Sarah's heartbeat surged as she recognized the familiar silhouette. The woman entering was someone who once cast doubt on Sarah's abilities to follow in her grandmother's footsteps. This was the moment she had dreaded but somehow knew would come. Would she allow the past to define her, or could she seize the opportunity to confront her critic and further assert her newfound resilience? As tension punctuated the air, Sarah braced herself for the confrontation that lay ahead. The flash of disbelief washed over Sarah as the figure stepped into the room. The familiar features of her former mentor, Elena, drew a mix of emotions within her: fear, apprehension, a hint of anger, and something else, something deeper. It had been years since Elena questioned Sarah's commitment to the legacy she wished to uphold. Now here she was, an unexpected storm entering the carefully constructed calm of Sarah's newfound clarity. Elena's eyes, once warm like a guiding light, had turned cold and scrutinizing. Sarah steeled herself, feeling the fervor of her earlier confidence begin to waver. She couldn't let herself be dragged back into the shadows of doubt. She had come too far, emerged too vividly from the depths of insecurity to allow this encounter to unravel her progress. Interesting presentation, Sarah, Elena began, her voice dripping with only half-concealed skepticism. However, it seems you are romanticizing a time when options were limited. Women died in childbirth, and many had no choice but to comply with the norms of those times, a reality modern medicine has helped us escape. The air thickened, turning the workshop's buzzing excitement into a dense, suffocating silence. Sarah felt her pulse quicken, each heartbeat intensifying her resolve. She remembered her ancestors' struggles, the determination that coursed through the pages of her journal, and the hope she carried for all women. This was not just about proving a point. It was about guardianship of their stories and the right to choose. Actually, she managed to say, her voice steadying, those women found strength in their circumstances. Their stories are about resilience. Yes, medicine has advanced, and that's vital. But that does not negate the need for options or the validity of home births. Women today should know their choices without fear. As she articulated her response, she could feel her spirit rising, declarations of independence breathing life into her words. Still, behind Elena's critical exterior, she could sense a flicker of nostalgia, perhaps even the ghost of fond memories of Sarah's growth. Encouraged, Sarah continued, sharing how the journal had transformed her outlook. What if we embraced both? What if understanding historical practices helped equip us better to approach today's choices? Elena's gaze narrowed. The critics she had faced earlier seemed trivial compared to this looming confrontation. Sarah was certain that every word she uttered could be dissected, criticized, and weaponized against her. Yet, in that moment of self-doubt, a warmth blossomed inside her, an acceptance of the paradoxes of motherhood, history, and agency. I've spent many years dismissing the very idea of choice because it felt reckless, Elena said, surprising Sarah. Maybe I feared you would unearth truths I've tried to bury. You make me rethink my views, and that frightens me. Amidst a chorus of murmurs from her classmates, Sarah saw the glimmers of intrigue and admiration forming anew. This was not just an argument, it was an exchange of philosophies. She wasn't merely defending her ideas. She was broadening the dialogue, bridging the past with the present. But just as Sarah began to entertain the promise of shifting perspectives, Elena continued, her challenge sharpened and decisive. If I join you in this journey, what if it leads women away from safety? What if, in reviving these practices, we lose their trust? The question hung ominously in the air, testing Sarah's convictions. Would her pursuit of empowerment blind her to potential dangers? The fear of risk surged again. In that moment, the clarity she had fought hard to maintain shattered, replaced by the crunch of troubling dilemmas. Caught between her belief in choice and the looming doubt of safety, Sarah felt the weight of responsibility. She understood she now stood at a precipice not just of her own journey but potentially of others as well. What if her endeavor to bring awareness inadvertently opened Pandora's box? Emboldened by the unexpected support from peers, Sarah knew she was not alone, but could she confront the very fear she sought to navigate? Would she find the courage to not only defend her vision but also reconcile those concerns? The walls of her resolve trembled as she pondered the next steps, bound by history, yet free to write her own. The moment hung, clamoring for resolution, and Sarah braced for whatever lay ahead as new questions began to arise. How could she balance her ambitions and the safety it might compromise? As her breath steadied, she swore to reclaim her voice amid the uncertainty. The time had come to elevate the conversation from mere anecdotes to sincere exploration. Would she dare to confront the fear with courage, or falter back into the safety of doubt? The path ahead remained shrouded in ambiguity, but one thing was certain. She was not backing down now. The tension in the room was palpable, each second straining against Sarah's resolve. Her heart raced not just from the confrontation, but from the realization of how deeply ingrained fears could influence her choices. Could her pursuit of a holistic understanding truly empower women, or was she blindly advocating an outdated perspective? As she stood before her classmates, who were glued to the unfolding drama, she knew she had to formulate a strategy that would not only defend her beliefs, but would also address the very real concerns Elena voiced. Taking a moment to breathe, she allowed herself to consider all angles. Would transparency and education be enough to mitigate the risks she sensed? For a fleeting moment, she felt vulnerable, her confidence wavering as she considered the enormity of her undertaking. Let us explore that further, Sarah finally said, her voice brimming with a calm that belied her internal turmoil. What if, instead of rejecting the past out of fear, we engage with it critically? We can create workshops, provide access to validated resources, and support informed choices that resonate with women today. Safety doesn't have to mean fear. It can mean being empowered with knowledge. Elena's brow furrowed as she nodded slowly. There was an emergence of curiosity against her skepticism. This was an opening. It was as if Sarah had poked through a layer of doubt. But beyond the academy walls loomed a greater challenge: the societal norms that refused to reconsider childbirth's narrative. In that moment, Sarah felt a fierce need to embody a new kind of educator, one who didn't just teach but inspired. Later that evening, Driven by a renewed determination, Sarah returned to her small apartment. The once comforting silence now felt like an echo chamber of her earlier doubts. She turned on her laptop and adopted a new mantra, her fingers flying over the keys. Reflect, learn, adapt. In the past, she might have hesitated, allowing thoughts of inadequacy to creep in. But now, she was willing to confront those feelings, to sift through them like clay, shaping her vision with purpose. As her proposals began to take shape in the form of an extensive outline, she reflected on what had unfolded that day. There was a certain fearlessness brewing within her, a commitment to dismantle her own apprehensions in order to build something meaningful. She didn't have all the answers, and perhaps much of what she intended to do would attract more criticism from those set in their ways. Nevertheless, that risk fueled her ambition rather than dwindled it. The idea crystallized. This was about more than just educating others. It was about creating a narrative shift. She wielded a responsibility to honor the legacies of those women who came before her while also advocating for present-day choices. Each chapter of her proposed initiative would delve into historical practices, but also serve as a springboard for discussions around safety and autonomy. It was a fusion of knowledge and empowerment. Yet, just as the excitement of her ambition began to wash over her, the shadow of doubt crept back in. What if her message was rejected outright? What if Elena, in her influential position, opposed her at every turn? Sarah felt the clash of fear and courage rise within her again. In moments past, she might have stepped back, but this time she was determined to confront her critics head-on. Perhaps she could reach out to Elena for a collaborative discussion, to bridge their differing viewpoints. Would she dare to risk her budding confidence to acknowledge the very fears that held her back? As she settled into bed that night, her mind whirled with possibilities and potential topics yet to explore. The unraveling conversation with Elena danced like a flame before her. Finding the balance between honoring legacy and promoting choice was only just the beginning of this complex journey. Just then, as her exhaustion began to engulf her, a chilling thought found its ground in her heart. If she didn't act soon, would her message fade away? Before it could take root, the urgency to solidify her vision pressed upon her, challenging her to step outside her comfort zone. And so, with determination sleeping at the forefront of her mind, Sarah vowed to initiate a dialogue with Elena. The time had come to confront not only her own insecurities but also to engage in a partnership that could redefine their understanding of childbirth together. Would unwillingness to ensure safety thwart her aspirations? Or could their contrasting beliefs actually lead to transformative insights? With that question demanding resolution, Sarah drifted into a restless sleep, uncertain of what dawn would reveal. The next day dawned with a resolute sun slicing through the clouds, illuminating Sarah's humble apartment. She awoke with a sense of purpose that pushed her to toss aside her initial hesitations. It was time to take action rather than allowing fear to stifle her aspirations. Sarah brewed a cup of coffee, each deliberate movement of her routine fueling her growing confidence. As she took her first sip, her gaze rested on her laptop. The outline she began to sketch the previous night came back to her vividly, its promising potential igniting her ambitions anew. The idea of addressing perceptions around childbirth felt like unearthing vast knowledge buried beneath thick layers of oblivion. What she was embarking on was neither simple nor conventional, but it resonated with the strength of her voice, her truth waiting to be articulated. With caffeine coursing through her, Sarah settled down at her desk and began drafting an email to Elena. The thought of reaching out still tightened her chest with trepidation, but she reminded herself of the purpose behind it all. She had to lean into vulnerability to invite constructive dialogue. "Dear Elena," she typed, "I believe we could create something valuable together if we were to combine our perspectives." Her fingers flew over the keys, channeling the urgency that had taken root within her. Sending the email became a cathartic release, but Sarah was acutely aware that this was only the tip of the iceberg. Waiting with bated breath for a reply necessitated inner strength. She forced herself to channel this anticipation into productive work. Rather than relinquishing control to anxiety, she dove deeper into her research, scouring ancient medical texts and women's experiences through history. What had long been relegated as taboo was slowly revealing the possibilities of empowerment within the narratives of the past. Each insight she uncovered fortified her resolve. Women throughout time had navigated childbirth armed with wisdom handed down through generations. Their strength wasn't merely about combating societal fears, it was about reclaiming the narrative that had been co-opted from them. Perhaps the workshops she envisioned could incorporate these stories, allowing women to not only learn but engage with their lineage. Days stretched forward, filled with meticulous preparation. Sarah felt herself evolving into a more impactful educator, blending historical knowledge with a modern understanding of safety and agency. It was thrilling yet challenging. The more she immersed herself, the more she realized how thick the traditional beliefs wrapped around childbirth were. Dismantling those would require perseverance. From time to time, her mind wandered back to her interaction with Elena. She could practically hear Elena's powerful voice echoing the warnings about the repercussions of misaligned messages. Despite their contrasting views, Sarah could envision a space where both narratives might coexist, where fear could be transformed into an ally for education, rather than a barrier against understanding. Then came the reply, a quick response from Elena, an invitation to meet for coffee. Surging excitement wrestled with apprehension as Sarah read through the message. This was her chance to convert suspicion into partnership. Yet, a whirlwind of insecurities erupted. What if the meeting turned contentious? What if Elena pushed back even harder against her ideas? But deep down, Sarah understood that this was crucial for her own development. She had an opportunity not just to advocate for her vision, but to challenge her own fears directly. Gathering up her notes and preparing for their meeting required all her newfound determination. As Sarah stood before her bathroom mirror, she practiced articulating her thoughts, her voice shaking only slightly at first. With renewed conviction, she saw that her battle was not only with Elena but also with the parts of herself that still feared rejection. The time to engage with her fears was now. She stepped away from the mirror, realizing the true weight of her mission, to forge a path for herself beyond fear, into the realm of collaboration and transformation. Would she be able to stand her ground and foster a connection with someone so ideologically opposed to her? Thoughts swirling in her mind, Sarah resolved to embrace whatever unfolded at that coffee shop. The outcome was uncertain, yet her fear of voicing her beliefs was being eclipsed by a budding sense of purpose. And so, with her heart racing with both anticipation and trepidation, she set out for the meeting, determined to face the challenge head-on. Would this conversation open doors to profound understanding, or would it cement a wall between their opposing views? The moment of truth awaited her, demanding to be faced. The coffee shop buzzed with energy, a vibrant backdrop to the storm of thoughts swirling in Sarah's mind. As she entered, her senses were assaulted by the rich aroma of roasted beans and the chatter of patrons animated by their conversations. She spotted Elena at a small table in the corner, one hand wrapped around a steaming cup, the other holding a phone. A flurry of nerves danced in Sarah's stomach, but she approached, determined to seize this moment. Elena looked up, her expression a mix of curiosity and guardedness. They exchanged brief pleasantries before both grew silent, the air thick with unspoken tension. Sarah took a seat across from her, adjusting her notes nervously. Here was the clash of ideologies converging, two distinct voices vying for recognition in a conversation that held the potential to reshape her vision. Taking a deep breath, Sarah began. I appreciate you meeting with me, Elena. I believe there's a lot we can learn from each other's perspectives. Her voice wavered slightly, but she pushed through, recalling the countless times she envisioned this exchange playing out in her mind. As she recounted her research, the stories of women navigating childbirth throughout history, she noticed Elena's brow furrowing in skepticism. Elena countered with her views, firmly reinforcing the need for scientific clarity in discussions around childbirth. People need to understand the reality of these risks. We should ground our workshops in evidence, not narratives steeped in euphemism. Her tone was assertive, and each point felt like a carefully aimed dart at the essence of Sarah's mission. Yet, rather than retreating into herself, Sarah felt a flicker of defiance surge. But those narratives are equally important, Elena. They empower women. Too often, history has stripped them of agency. Just think about how healing it can be to reclaim these experiences. The conversation danced between agreement and contention, but Sarah's resolve solidified with each passing moment. Every rebuttal from Elena challenged Sarah to articulate her thoughts with clarity and compassion. The weight of the other woman's expertise pressed down on her. Yet in that pressure, Sarah discovered a deeper understanding of her own convictions. Elena hesitated, and for a moment, Sarah could see her considering the significance of those stories. She pressed on, perhaps we can find common ground. Historic narratives don't negate scientific truth. They can coexist, helping attendees not only to be informed but also to feel connected to their own stories. As they delved deeper, Sarah began to realize that the discourse wasn't just about childbirth. It was a reflection of their own larger struggles. In that dimly lit corner of the cafe, they were both grappling with expectations, whether from society, their professions, or within. This conversation illuminated not only Sarah's vision for her workshops, but also pointed to her own development as a communicator, a negotiator willing to embrace complexity. But just as they seemed to reach a tentative understanding, Elena's expression shifted sharply. And what happens when those narratives conflict with facts? Are you prepared for the backlash, Sarah? Because it will come. Her words pierced through Sarah's burgeoning confidence, a stark reminder of the stakes. Could she maintain her authenticity while facing inevitable criticisms? The capacity to merge those stories with foundational truths seemed more daunting than she anticipated. A knot tightened in Sarah's stomach, yet she recognized this moment as pivotal not just for her career, but for her own personal evolution. Facing this challenge head-on was both frightening and intoxicating. As they wrapped up their conversation, Sarah realized they had laid the groundwork for something transformative. There was potential, but there was also uncertainty looming. The coffee shop buzz faded into a background hum, and Sarah resolved to delve deeper into both narratives moving forward. Could she elevate the dialogue beyond mere conflict into a collective understanding? She left the cafe burdened by questions and fueled by insights, aware now that embracing vulnerability was as essential in forging partnerships as it was in confronting her fears. As she stepped into the sunlight, thoughts of the next steps intertwined with a realization she could emerge stronger through the struggle. Would the gritty realities of their collaboration prove beneficial, or would fear reign once again? The question danced in her mind as she set out, ready to confront whatever lay ahead. As Sarah walked away from the cafe, the warmth of the sun felt both inviting and oppressive. The vibrant street around her contrasted sharply with the confusion swirling in her mind. She had always envisioned her workshops as spaces of empowerment through storytelling, yet Elena's challenges echoed in her thoughts, a persistent reminder of the academic rigor she faced. Determined, Sarah navigated through the throngs of shoppers and tourists, the sounds of the city blending into a backdrop for her internal monologue. She halted at a small park, seeking a moment of peace amidst the chaos. Sitting on a weathered bench, she pulled out her notebook, its pages filled with fragments of history, quotes from women long gone, and her own notes from the conversation with Elena. Each bullet point felt heavy, weighted with the responsibility she felt toward the narratives she wanted to share. Sarah paused, staring into the distance, her thoughts racing. Could she indeed merge the empirical with the experiential in a way that didn't sacrifice one for the other? Could she build a bridge between the powerful stories of women who had faced childbirth throughout the ages and the stark realities that modern science demanded? She turned back to her notes, underlining a passage about a medieval midwife who had been revered in her community, not for her medical prowess, but for her deep understanding of women's struggles and triumphs. A flicker of inspiration ignited within her. The stories deserved to be told, but they also needed to be balanced with the insights of modern science. This duality represented her path forward. If she were to truly lead impactful workshops, she needed to dive deeper, broadening her understanding of both historical narratives and the current scientific landscape. It was crucial not only to educate but to instill confidence in her future participants that they could trust their own experiences while being informed about real risks. With renewed determination, Sarah formulated a plan. She would reach out to local historians and midwives who could provide narratives steeped in their unique experiences. Simultaneously, she would consult healthcare professionals to gather the scientific data Elena emphasized. She could create a curriculum that honored both realms of knowledge, one that exposed the complexity of childbirth as both a historical and medical event. Yet, with every intention came the shadow of Elena's warning. Could she truly withstand the inevitable controversy? The thought of criticism made her chest tighten, a reminder of the emotional stakes involved. It wouldn't be enough to simply present information. She would have to advocate fiercely for her vision, defending the value of personal stories in the face of skepticism. Standing up from the bench, Sarah glanced at her reflection in a nearby window, peeling back the layers of self-doubt. This was more than a project. This was a calling, a transformative journey she wasn't just participating in, but leading. As she made her way back home, her mind teetered on the edge of apprehension and excitement. How would her efforts to blend narratives and facts be received? The thought hung like a low fog, a veil over her optimism. The evening stretched before her like a blank canvas, a space for consideration and strategy. She would have to engage with Elena again, not just as opponents but as collaborators, unveiling the potential of what their combined perspectives could yield. A surge of adrenaline coursed through her. Facing Elena again would be critical, pushing her resolve to its breaking points. And yet, as she planned her approach, a voice in the back of her mind whispered a daunting thought. What if Elena wasn't the only barrier? What if others in the field found her approach too unorthodox? Sarah picked up her pace, her heart racing with the possibilities of both triumph and defeat. She had stepped into an arena not only of educational discourse but of personal evolution. Tomorrow's conversation loomed ahead like a storm, ready to challenge her assurances. Once again, would she be able to defend her vision, or would she falter under the weight of her critics? The answer lay just ahead, cloaked in uncertainty and opportunity. The sun had barely crested the horizon, painting the world with soft hues of gold and amber as Sarah prepared for the day ahead. Her heart was a drum, echoing the weight of her thoughts. The anticipation of her meeting with Elena filled her mind, a mixture of dread and determination gnawing at her resolve. Today would either solidify her vision or force her to reconsider everything she had worked to build. She dressed deliberately, opting for a light blue blouse that felt soothing yet professional. It was a simple reminder that she was not just a voice echoing the struggles of women from centuries past, but a present advocate standing firm in support of an important cause. She glanced at herself in the mirror, searching her reflection for an advocate, a champion ready to confront the shadows of doubt. Arriving at the coffee shop where they had agreed to meet, Sarah found a table tucked away in a corner and escaped from the bustle around her. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee wrapped her in a comforting embrace as she waited, fingers tapping rhythmically on the table, a physical manifestation of her anxiety. Each tick of the second hand weighed heavy with unspoken thoughts. When Elena entered, surveying the crowd with a discerning gaze before settling across from Sarah, the air thickened. Sarah's rehearsed opening lines evaporated. Instead, she felt a rush of vulnerability wash over her. "Thank you for meeting with me," Sarah began, striving to keep her voice steady. Elena nodded casually, her expression unreadable. "Let us hear what you've been working on." "I'm looking to create workshops that blend historical narratives of childbirth with contemporary scientific understanding," Sarah revealed through a rush of adrenaline. She launched into her vision, her words tumbling over one another, fueled by conviction. "The aim is to empower women by acknowledging their stories, while also providing the necessary medical context." Elena leaned back, eyebrow arched, a visual cue of skepticism that made Sarah's stomach twist. "You really think women want to hear scientific breakdowns when sharing intimate experiences?" Sarah felt the ground beneath her tremble, but she steadied herself. "I believe they deserve both. Women should understand the realities they face while feeling the strength derived from stories of those who came before them. It's essential to validate their experiences in the light of both history and science." "Sounds idealistic, but what's your plan for overcoming the possible backlash from purists in the field?" Elena countered, her position firm, a gauntlet thrown down for Sarah to rise to. Doubt flickered in Sarah's mind. The shadow of Elena's warning echoed through her thoughts. Stuttering through her defense would be a mistake. Instead, she mustered all the resolve she could conjure. I'll seek collaboration with historians and midwives, and I'll engage with healthcare professionals. This isn't just my dream, it's a synthesis of many voices. Together, we can create something meaningful. Elena's features softened slightly, intrigued but not convinced. What if they don't see the value in merging the two worlds? What if your approach gets shut down before it even begins? That question felt like an arrow piercing her armor. Then I'll adapt. I'll learn and grow through the process. I'm committed to this journey, no matter how it unfolds. Elena studied her intently, the challenge of the moment palpable. Sarah watched as the internal calculations crossed her colleague's face. Would she be willing to take this leap of faith alongside her? Could they forge a collaborative path that neither had envisioned before? A pause stretched between them, tension coiling like a spring. Sarah could sense the potential for either collaboration or confrontation within that silence, her heart racing as she awaited a sign from Elena that could shift the course of this conversation. Finally, Elena smirked. Let us see if you can handle the heat of real criticism. I'll share your proposal at the next conference. But remember, not everyone will embrace unconventional ideas. Sarah swallowed hard, steeling herself against the fear. I'm ready, she asserted, determination igniting within her. Tomorrow could bring not just the scrutiny of her peers, but a way to push beyond her fears into the realm of possibility. As they wrapped up their meeting, an exhilarating sensation coursed through Sarah. This was not merely a challenge, this was the pulse of evolution, not just of ideas but within her very self. With every step away from the coffee shop, she felt a flicker of hope meeting the invisible doubts. What awaited her at the conference felt akin to standing on the precipice of opportunity. Confidence surged through her, a promise to face whatever awaited with unwavering resolve. But would she be ready to confront the half-formed objections that lingered in the minds of her critics? The thoughts spiraled in her mind, painting the path ahead with shades of uncertainty and possibility. As the sun climbed higher into the sky, flooding the world with light, Sarah's mind pulsed with unresolved questions. The events from the coffee shop replayed in her thoughts like a loop, each time highlighting her own insecurities. Had she been convincing enough? Would her proposal resonate with her peers? The looming conference was now more than just a presentation. It was her chance to affirm her vision. But it also meant exposing herself to criticism that might shatter her nascent confidence. She busied herself with preparations, printing drafts and note cards. Each paper she touched bore the imprint of her aspirations, yet also the weight of fear of inadequacy, fear of dismissal. Deep down, she questioned if the blend of history and science could bridge the gap she envisioned, or if it was a reckless gamble, a dream she desperately clung to. As the hours ticked by, she slipped into a rhythm of study, immersing herself in the narratives she planned to share. Each historical tale of childbirth offered glimmers of resilience and survival, infusing her with strength. Yet when reflection pulled her in, she could not escape the nagging thought. Would this blend serve to elevate women's voices or trivialize their experiences in the clinical jargon of scientific discourse? That night, sleep eluded her as she mulled over the potential reactions of her audience. In vivid flashes, she saw horrified faces and dismissive expressions, and heard scoffs from those who might see her as naive. It was one thing to present an idea, but quite another to defend it against the tide of established conventions. Still, amidst that turmoil, a flicker of resolve ignited within her. This was her chance to sow seeds of change. She visualized herself standing before the crowd, presenting not just information, but creating a dialogue, deconstructing the stereotypes that encased the topic of childbirth and instead inviting attendees to participate in a richer understanding. The morning of the conference dawned cool and crisp, a stark contrast to the roiling storm in her chest. Anxiety surged, but this time, she took it as a signal, a signpost pointing to her determination rather than doubt. Stepping into the venue, she felt a weight settle on her shoulders, both the pressure of the looming presentation and a sudden burst of purpose. As she scanned the faces in the audience, Sarah felt a rush of adrenaline. She recognized familiar colleagues whose skepticism could either sharpen her arguments or threaten to undermine her confidence. She took a deep breath, anchoring herself in the knowledge that she had prepared thoroughly. Elena had planted a seed of skepticism, now Sarah needed to water it with conviction. However, that initial burst of confidence was almost immediately challenged as one of the panelists, an esteemed historian with decades of rigid academia behind him, began his critique. He dismissed her proposal outright, insisting that blending historical narrative with contemporary science would dilute the profoundness of both realms. The words struck her, but as the audience listened intently, she felt the storm within her settle, replaced by clarity. This was not merely a defense. It was an opportunity to engage, to adapt her vision in real time. She felt the shift within, the instinct to confront not only his arguments but her own fears as well. "Thank you for your perspective," she began, voice steady despite her racing heart. "But my aim is not to dilute but to enhance the discourse around childbirth. The stories of women throughout history are profoundly shaped by their societal context, and in turn, understanding this context through a scientific lens amplifies their narratives." The murmurs in the audience shifted. Her words had struck a chord. As she navigated her rebuttal, she could feel the inexplicable thrill of growth, an affirmation that she had the capacity to engage with her critics constructively. Her voice became stronger, conviction rising as she intertwined personal anecdotes with historical evidence, showcasing how science could coexist with personal experience. By the end of the session, she had shifted the tide of skepticism, earning nods of acknowledgement from unexpected corners of the room. The applause, however modest, resonated within her as an affirmation of her vision. Yet, as she stepped away from the podium, the question echoed in her mind. Had she truly addressed the underlying fears or merely deflected them? The conversation that needed to take place was not only out there, in the audience, but within her own heart. What lay ahead in her journey would reveal much more than just professional aspirations. It would challenge the very core of her identity. What revelations awaited her as she embraced the path of growth, confronting the voices of doubt both internal and external? In the aftermath of the conference, Sarah felt an exhilarating mix of triumph and introspection flooding her senses. Her presentation had not only struck a chord with her audience, but it had expanded her own understanding of her mission. Days turned into opportunities for reflection, each interaction with colleagues sparking new thoughts about the delicate interplay of history and modern science. As she journeyed home, the conversation buzzed in her mind. Each thoughtful question and critical comment she'd encountered forced her to reconsider her approach. This was not about defending herself, but about opening avenues for deeper conversations. She began to envision her workshops not just as lectures but as dialogues, spaces to explore the past collaboratively while acknowledging the progression of understanding around childbirth. The following week, propelled by the momentum from the conference, Sarah reached out to historians, midwives, and medical professionals, inviting them to contribute to her initiative. Each meeting was a plunge into vulnerability, as she acknowledged previous anxieties while embracing her role as a connector of narratives. The tangible threads of shared wisdom began weaving a visionary tapestry, a curriculum that simultaneously honored ancestral practices and validated modern concerns. One evening, after attending a local seminar on contemporary obstetrics, she cornered a respected obstetrician known for promoting a woman-centered approach. Noticing the hesitance used when people spoke of home births, she asserted, "What if we work together? We have the chance to create something profound. We can educate and empower through understanding." The obstetrician smiled knowingly, seeing Sarah's passion as a beacon rather than a threat. They brainstormed potential frameworks for the workshops, merging facts with historical narratives. Slowly, her vision solidified. Interactive sessions where attendees could hear the stories of women from both eras, encouraging them to share their own experiences while assessing their choices through a balanced lens of knowledge. Weeks later, when the first workshop launched, the air was thick with anticipation. Women arrived with their own stories, carrying family traditions and modern experiences that mingled in a sacred space. Sarah welcomed them warmly, smiling as they exchanged stories about childbirth practices, myths, and fears. This was not merely an educational session. It was a collective acknowledgement of journeys shared. As the discussions unfolded, it became apparent that women resonated deeply with historical narratives. They appreciated the stories and perspectives from centuries past, filling in the gaps of societal knowledge that often left them feeling isolated in their experiences. Finally, as Sarah shared her family's stories and those of countless brave women from history, she saw the smiles of recognition blooming across faces. Their histories connected, sparking dialogues that transcended time. Women began standing to share their own tales, each voice adding depth and richness to the tapestry. They were weaving together a testament to empowerment and agency. At the workshop's conclusion, Sarah felt an overwhelming sense of accomplishment. The smiles, the stories, the validation, it all crystallized into proof of her transformation. She had forged not just a professional path, but an authentic and fulfilling connection to her own legacy. Her fears had morphed into a powerful tool. She had learned to embrace them while leading others towards their own narratives. Days later, Sarah received an email from Elena, inviting her to present not just at a local conference again, but also to speak at a national event. Her heart raced at the thought, but this time, it was different. It was full of potential rather than fear. Sarah had achieved more than she could have imagined. She had built confidence, bridged historical perspectives with modern expertise, and most importantly, she had empowered her community. Sarah knew as she accepted the invitation that she had transformed not just her career, but her whole identity. She was a midwife, a guardian of female narratives, a bridge between the past and the present. Each interaction in this newfound role fortified her position, ensuring that she was not just vocalizing choices, but fostering an environment where women felt celebrated and empowered to explore their journeys. No longer bound by self-doubt, Sarah demonstrated an accomplished balance of respect for childbirth's rich history and advocacy for modern practices. With her heart full of pride, she embraced her legacy, transformed and resolute, ready to embark on a broader stage. And so, as she reflected on the journey it had taken to arrive at this moment, she felt unshakable in her identity. A recognized midwife of stories, forever committed to ensuring every woman felt valued and understood. Now is the time for you to take action. If you enjoyed this emotional tale of transformation and empowerment, you need to subscribe to the channel immediately. Don't miss the next exclusive story that could inspire you to overcome your own challenges. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and ensure more heartwarming narratives like this reach those who need them. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who would love to witness this conclusion. Your support can make a huge difference in spreading stories of triumph and courage.